Have you ever walked into a room and just felt something was off? Even before anyone said a word, that moment isn't magic. It's awareness. And when we choose to listen with more than our ears, we start to read people not to control them, but to connect. Reading people without them knowing isn't about decoding some secret language or pulling a psychological trick. It's about becoming so present, so grounded in your own emotional intelligence that you start to see the little tells. Things people say when they're not speaking at all. We're talking about body language. The fidget of a foot when someone's anxious. The slight turning away of shoulders when they feel discomfort. The eyes that linger a second too long or not at all. These aren't just habits. They're signals. And then there are micro expressions, those quick flashes of truth on someone's face before they put their mask back on. A flicker of sadness, a flash of anger, a look of fear. You'll miss them if you're not present. But if you are, if you train yourself to notice without judging, you'll begin to see what people try to hide. Most of us have been taught, either directly or subtly, that reading people is about gaining an edge, that if we can just figure them out, we'll be safer, smarter, one step ahead. But here's the truth. If your goal in reading people is to feel in control, you'll never truly connect. Because real connection begins not with strategy, but with curiosity. Curiosity is soft. It's humble. It walks into a conversation and says, I don't know everything about you, but I want to. It doesn't assume, it asks. It doesn't label, it learns. And that energy, people can feel it. They can tell the difference between someone who's watching to judge and someone who's observing to understand. Control is rooted in fear. Curiosity is born from courage. When we try to control how others show up by analyzing, predicting, or preemptively protecting ourselves, we're not really seeing them. We're seeing our own fear dressed up as insight. But when we show up with curiosity, something shifts. We stop bracing for impact and start leaning in. We ask ourselves, what's it like to be them right now? What might they be feeling that they don't have the words for? And here's where it gets really powerful. People open up more when they don't feel observed like a science project, when they feel seen without being studied, when they sense we're not here to control the narrative, but to care about it. In curiosity, there's no need to read people like a puzzle. You're not collecting data to outsmart them. You're witnessing a human being in real time. Their story, their fear, their longing, their humor, their discomfort, it all starts to unfold. And you don't have to pull or pry. You just stay present. You stay open. So if you want to read people without them knowing, start by trading your agenda for empathy. Don't aim to decode someone's behavior. Aim to understand their experience. Because when people feel safe, they naturally reveal themselves. And the safest place you can offer is your honest, curious presence. We are constantly speaking even when we're silent. Our bodies tell stories that our words are too polite, too scared, or too unsure to tell. And if you want to truly read someone, you have to learn to listen with your eyes. Because body language, it's not just a set of gestures. It's the raw, unfiltered confession of the nervous system. We've all seen it, even if we haven't named it. The way someone's shoulders sink just a little when they're disappointed. How arms cross tightly across the chest don't just mean resistance, they can mean protection. A clenched jaw, a bouncing knee, eyes darting toward the door mid-conversation. These aren't quirks, they're signals. Quiet signals. Unspoken confessions. Here's the thing, most people don't realize how much their bodies are saying. Words are curated, words are cautious, but the body is impulsive. It speaks before the person has time to edit or filter. That's why, if you're paying attention, you'll often feel the truth before you hear it. But, and this is crucial, reading body language well requires compassion, not assumption. It's easy to misread a moment when you're looking for proof instead of seeking understanding. Just because someone looks away doesn't mean they're lying. They might be ashamed, they might be afraid, or they might be thinking of the last time they were vulnerable and got burned. A shift in posture isn't always defensiveness. Sometimes it's just a moment of bracing for impact, for judgment, for the pain they expect but haven't yet received. To read someone through their body language means watching without rushing to a conclusion. It means holding space for the fact that everything we express is layered. It means reminding ourselves what I'm seeing is a reflection of their inner world, not a commentary on mine. So the next time you're in conversation with someone, watch gently, not with suspicion, but with compassion. Look for what the body is whispering underneath the conversation. Are their hands restless? Are their shoulders tight? Do they lean in or pull back? Are they turning away slightly, even as they smile? That smile, by the way, might not be joy. It might be survival. People sometimes smile through anxiety, through grief, through the unbearable tension of not wanting to disappoint. Reading body language is not about pinning someone down. It's about understanding what they're holding in. So be kind with what you see. Let your attention feel like safety, not surveillance. Because when you treat people like they're already telling you the truth, they often start to. And that's where connection begins. Not with confrontation, but with quiet observation, with grace, and with the kind of attention that says, I see you, even when you don't know you're being seen. Before the mind can censor, before the words can shape the truth, before the body finds its posture, there's a flash, a flicker, a moment that escapes the mask. That moment is a micro-expression, and it is one of the most honest things a human being can offer, even if it only lasts a fraction of a second. Micro-expressions are those involuntary facial movements that appear for less than half a second. Fear in the eyes, a smirk of contempt, a wince of sadness, a brief twist of disgust. Most of the time, people don't even know they've made them, but they do. And if you're paying attention, not just looking, but really watching, you'll catch these tiny windows into someone's inner emotional world. They're fast, they're subtle, but they are powerful because they're not crafted, they're felt. They come from the limbic system, not the prefrontal cortex. They're emotional reflexes, not rational responses. And that makes them pure, undiluted, unpolished, soul-level honesty. Imagine someone saying, I'm fine, but for a blink of a moment, their eyebrows draw together in a way that signals fear. Or they say, I'm happy for you, and there's the briefest downturn of the mouth that whispers sadness. That's not lying. That's someone torn between what they feel and what they feel safe enough to express. Most people miss these signs not because they're not intelligent, but because they're distracted. They're thinking of what to say next. They're checking their phone. They're focusing on the story instead of the storyteller. But when you become fully present with another person, when you're not rushing to respond, defend, or fix, you begin to see things most people don't. You begin to notice those brief flashes of the soul trying to speak. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. That's when reading people becomes less about profiling and more about witnessing. It's not about catching someone in a contradiction. It's about catching someone in a moment of emotional truth, a truth they might not even be ready to name, a truth they've buried under social norms or fear of rejection, a truth that says, this is what I really feel, if only for a second, but this part is sacred. What you do with that information matters. You don't confront someone's microexpression with a spotlight. You don't call it out like evidence. You hold it quietly, gently. You let it guide your empathy, not your ego. If you see fear flash in someone's eyes, maybe you slow down. If you glimpse grief beneath their smile, maybe you ask a softer question. If you notice a flinch of shame, maybe you offer presence without pressure. Microexpressions are not just about reading people. They are about recognizing the truth beneath the surface and responding with care. Because the soul doesn't speak in long paragraphs. It speaks in reflexes, in flickers, in barely there are expressions that come and go in the blink of an eye. But if you are still enough and open enough, you'll see them. And when you do, you'll be holding something tender, something true, not someone's performance, but their humanity. Energy doesn't lie. You felt it. You walk into a room and something feels off. No words have been spoken. No one's even looked your way. But your body knows there's tension in the air. Or maybe it's warmth. Maybe it's safety. When energy has its own way of connecting with others, there's a safety. Maybe it's the sense that you can finally exhale. Whatever it is, there's no explanation, but also no denying it. That's energy. And here's the thing, energy doesn't lie. We are emotional creatures long before we are logical ones. From birth, we're wired to pick up on subtle cues in voice, posture, facial expression, rhythm, even silence. And underneath it all, there's a current, a tone, an emotional frequency that people carry with them, whether they speak or not. It's the vibe you get before the conversation even starts. You might not be able to name it, but you can feel it. A coworker walks into the room with a smile, but something feels tight. You sense they're frustrated. A friend says, I'm good, but their presence feels heavy. You know they're not okay. Or maybe someone barely says a word, and yet you feel deeply calm in their presence. Like you can let your guard down. That's energy speaking. Here's where it gets important. You can't fake the energy you bring into a space. You can fake your words, you can fake your tone, you can even fake a smile. But energy, That comes from your internal state. It flows from the truth you're carrying, whether you're willing to say it or not. That's why we need to pay attention, not just to what people say, but to how we feel around them. It's not about being psychic, it's about being present. The more grounded you are in your own emotions, the more sensitive you become to others. You start to sense when someone's words are out of alignment with what they're actually holding. You don't need to accuse or analyze, you just notice. You trust your body's intuitive wisdom. Something here doesn't match. And, this part matters, you don't need proof to trust that feeling. You don't need to interrogate it or validate it out loud. Sometimes reading people means simply honoring the emotional truth beneath the surface, even when it's unspoken. And let's flip this too. The energy you carry matters just as much. If you show up anxious, guarded, or defensive, people will feel it, even if you don't say a word. But if you show up calm, open, and grounded, that becomes an invitation for others to soften too. Energy is contagious. And when you bring safe, steady energy into a conversation, people tend to match it. They exhale, they tell the truth, they let you see more than they plan to. So if you want to read people without them knowing, start here. Pay attention to how they make you feel. And pay attention to how you make others feel. Because long before the words are spoken, long before the masks are lowered, and long before anyone realizes what they're revealing, their energy has already entered the room. And it's telling the truth. Most people think listening is about hearing what's said. But real listening, the kind that reveals what someone is really feeling, is about hearing what isn't said. It's about reading between the lines, beneath the words, beyond the script. We've been trained to focus on content, on bullet points, on what someone says they mean, but people don't always know how to say what they feel, or they're afraid to, or they've been punished for it in the past. So they say the safe thing, the polite thing, the expected thing. But underneath, there's often more. There's the pause before they answer, the way their voice dips when they talk about someone they miss, the slight hesitation when you ask if they're really okay, the quick change of topic when the subject hits too close to the heart. That's where the truth is hiding, in the gaps. And this kind of listening takes more than ears. It takes your full attention. It's not passive. It's not just waiting for your turn to speak. It's active noticing. Noticing what someone avoids. Noticing when their story skips over something tender. And it's not about calling them out. It's about being with them in that moment of tension and choosing not to look away. And there's a humility in that. You don't pretend to know more than you do. You don't rush to interpret or fix. You stay present and you ask with gentleness, when you said that, it felt like there might be more. Do you want to go there? Or sometimes you say nothing. You just hold the space, and that's enough. Listening between the lines isn't about decoding secrets. It's about recognizing humanity. It's not about catching someone off guard. It's about offering the kind of attention that lets someone unfold in their own time. So if you want to read people without them knowing, learn to become fluent in the language of pause, tone, rhythm, and restraint. Because sometimes the truth isn't in what they say, it's in what they almost said. When we are unaware of what we're carrying, we start projecting it onto everyone around us. We don't listen to hear them, we listen to defend us. We interpret people through the lens of our wounds, our fears, our patterns, and without realizing it, we mistake our own emotional echoes for their emotional truth. Self-awareness changes that. When you're aware of your own emotional terrain, your triggers, your defenses, your stories, you begin to create space between reaction and response. You start reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally. You start noticing, oh, that comment stung, but that might be more about my insecurity than their tone. You start checking in with yourself before making assumptions about someone else. And that self-check isn't a weakness, it's strength. Because when you can hold yourself with honesty and compassion, you can hold others that way too. You start seeing people more clearly because you're not filtering everything through your own unresolved stories. You also begin to notice patterns. You recognize that someone pulling away doesn't always mean abandonment. It might mean overwhelm. You understand that anger might be grief in armor. You recognize shame not because you've studied it in others, but because you've seen it in yourself. That's the gift of self-awareness. It gives you the emotional vocabulary to translate what others don't know how to say. But it's not just about knowing your triggers, it's about knowing your values. What kind of presence do you want to bring into a room? What does it feel like to be on the other side of you? When people are near you, do they feel the need to perform, or do they feel like they can breathe? Because the way you read others is shaped by the way you hold yourself. So if you want to understand someone's body language, emotions, silences, and signals, start by learning your own. If you want to recognize someone's unspoken truth, start by honoring your own truth when no one is watching. Reading people without them knowing isn't about becoming a master of observation. It's about becoming a student of your own humanity. Because when you've done the inner work, you stop needing people to explain themselves just so you can feel okay. You stop making every interaction about your worth. And you start seeing people as they are, not as you fear they might be. Self-awareness is where empathy begins. It's how we make room for the stories that aren't ours. And it's how we learn to hold space, not just to listen, not just to watch, but to understand. It's not about gaining the upper hand or decoding every micro movement like some emotional detective. It's about connection. It's about presence. And more than anything, it's about respecting the unspoken layers of the human experience. We read people best not when we're performing intelligence, but when we're practicing empathy. Not when we analyze their every word, but when we pay attention to the pauses, the glances, the silences. Not when we assume, but when we stay curious. The truth is, people are constantly communicating through their energy, their expressions, their posture, their voice, and their emotional rhythms. But most of that communication doesn't happen in words. It happens in flickers, in tension, in tiny ruptures, and invisible invitations. And if we're willing to slow down, tune in, and listen differently, we can begin to hear what's really being said. But we can't do that well unless we start with ourselves. Because the clearest lens you'll ever have is the one polished by self-awareness. The more you understand your own emotions, your own patterns, and your own defenses, the more space you create to see others as they truly are, not as projections of your fear, but as people worthy of care. So the invitation isn't just to read people, it's to understand them. It's to hold what they're showing you and what they're not with gentleness. It's to be the kind of person people don't even realize they're opening up to. Because your presence feels like safety, not scrutiny. And maybe that's the real secret. When people don't feel watched, they feel seen. And when they feel seen, they tell you everything you need to know. You just have to be willing to listen between the lines, to trust what isn't said, and to meet every moment not with control, but with curiosity, compassion, and the courage to truly connect.